everybody. Welcome to Doomer Optimism. I am Ashley Fitzgerald, you know me, and I am here with somebody who has been a friend of mine for a while now, Paul McNiel, and we just have not ever been able to find a time to meet because Paul's a really busy guy. He's just, busy with a
Yeah,
million different projects. And so I want to have Paul on not only because he's cool and he's a friend of the podcast and definitely in the orbit and I want to make sure that everybody's heard about him and his projects, but also because we have some upcoming things that we're doing together that I think will be fun to talk about. So first, I guess let's just have you introduce yourself and then we'll go from there.
sure. Well, hey Ashley and anybody listening. Yeah, I'm Paul McNeil. I don't know what by way of introduction. I I've been I was interested to discover the whole Doomer Optimist I don't know what you'd call it, project, collaboration, network.
Yeah.
Uh and it really fit in with a lot of the ideas and things that I was working on building and collaborating with other people on. I yeah, I introduction. I grew up off grid up in the woods of Quebec and moved down to the States and mostly homeschooled and was really interested in sort of the whole, Wendell Berry homesteader type mentality and spent quite a bit of time visiting all kinds of different projects from cults to communes, farms, stuff like that and traveling widely and have been and also educational projects from folk schools to different homeschool projects. Grew up mostly homeschool, went to Patrick Henry College, the homeschool college. So anyway, I've been trying to navigate this space of how we're supposed to be living in this modern world. um and I think you are too, and
Yeah.
so
This is funny because I kind of only have like ever heard bits and pieces of your background, and it's still like you still kind of remain a man of mystery to me. But it's funny because you and I both had this kind of seeking period, which mine is still ongoing, and yours is too, obviously. But like especially in my like young 20s, just traveling around everywhere and visiting a bunch of working on organic farms and visiting a bunch of like alternative lifestyle places, and that like taught me a lot about what I didn't like. Maybe more
yeah.
than anything that I did like. I was like, "Ugh, these freaking hippies, their communes, it never works." But what was the impetus of like all the exploring for you? Because for me, it was definitely like a kind of like maybe environmentalist doomerism and then like occupy doomerism around graduating from college. Like there's so much bad stuff going on. Like we've got to find some other way of living. Although I've kind of like come out of that stage now, but I don't know
Sure.
what.
I feel like I get along well. I feel like I meet a lot of people like you where we're kind of intersecting, but having come from opposite directions. Um, so I mean, about the time Occupy was going on, I was knee deep in real estate investment, so it was hard. I was trying to make my millions, so I was much more interested in the 1% than the people.
Becoming one.
Yeah, grousing about them. However, I was also I kind of went through the sort of um like Christian right wing, neocon Republican to sort of a libertarian. And probably by that point, I was like an anarchist ANCAP phase. And so, though I certainly wasn't on team, tax the rich, I also was, against the corporatocracy, and which I see sort of, is a part of the government, and that the whole what we're now these days referring to as the machine.
Yeah.
Uh, but so yeah, I didn't really come from any of that, and the environmental thing. I mean, I definitely concerned for the environment and all that, but definitely, no real doomerism there.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it had to do with growing the way I grew up and trying to not just the way I grew up, I guess, but the way that echoed, things that I read a lot of the books that I read in the past, and just the world around me, the internet, the information age. Um, I was very involved in. I mean, I was so that I guess I've been torn because, at the same time as I was dreaming of living in a cabin deep in the woods, which is kind of how I grew up, I
Yeah.
was trading on a laptop in the late '90s. And so that sort of duality of coming to terms with the power and usefulness of technology, with also just grappling with how it is leading me in a direction, my lifestyle, my not I hate that term lifestyle, but my form of life, my
Yeah.
way of life, my understanding of my surroundings, the people around me, and myself. I was not happy with where that was going in the internet age. So I've been, and not just the internet. Honestly, I think it's easy to sort of grouse about the sort of TikTok and kids these days, and that's a problem. But it goes back to even I think when a lot of people think back of the good old days, particularly the circles I'm in, like conservatives, they're like the good old days when Dad drove to work, and Mom was at home using the dishwasher or whatever.
Yeah.
Like that's all fairly new as well. I think the automobile, um, in some ways, brought more changes than the internet,
Right.
and really began the problem, began the breaking down of the social networks that were existing at that time.
Hmm.
So I think you and I are both on this camp of like, we're probably not gonna, put that back in the. Hold on 1 second. We're probably not going to turn that pickle back into a cucumber. Um, but we can be critical about things, and not just critical, but courageous about the life
Hmm.
choices we make.
Yeah,
And
that's it. Yeah. And okay, I have a couple of
yeah,
thoughts. The first is I think what's super interesting is I probably went through what are like the left-wing equivalent of these various fringe groups that you went through on the right, and kind of like, so it's like environmentalists, and then like anarchists, and then like, Bernie bros, and then going to all these intentional communities, like hippie intentional communities, and then like in Uruguay was kind of a weird offshoot of a lot of the left wing stuff with like, just small scale producers who are doing it from like a left wing hippie perspective, and like um earth building, natural building stuff. So I like went through all these iterations of like, I think what are various failing ideologies. They're fail like they're just not useful in different ways. And so um yeah, so I think what we have in common is that kind of like, I a little bit like um making your whole social group about your ideology is a little bit cringe, and there's
yeah,
challenges with every group who tries to do that, like the libertarians and the ANCAPs. And it's just like, how committed are you to like our anarchist point of view? And I've been at like all these freaking anarchist city meetings, and I'm just like just the purity politics, it's the dumbest thing you could possibly imagine. And then I think we have just landed on these similar questions of like the usefulness of
yeah,
technology, like where is the human, not just in the modern, like not just industrial era, but like historically, anthropologically, what are we supposed to be doing? And yeah, sorry, go ahead. You can
no,
keep.
I was just I was thinking about, as you described, all these people gathering and the ideological purity, and this term that I hear all the time, like-minded. We're trying to get together with like-minded people,
Like-minded, I know.
and but the thing they're many of them are trying to replicate, maybe not all, but the thing that many of them are trying to replicate, say small town America, even in say the 19th century or whatever, or various other sort of models they might have in their mind. Most of those were organic, and not entirely. I mean, you think about like you know the pilgrims or whatever. That wasn't organic, right? They had some ideological, but there are some problems there too. I mean, that's what I run up against. I think that's one of the biggest sort of irresolvable paradoxes that we're running up against, and something we could segue into something that the Wagon Box is kind of experimenting and trying to overcome, and that is you have to have some kind of cultural homogeneity to do anything together.
Yeah.
But as soon as you declare this is the grounds on which our cultural homogeneity is based, then the whole thing becomes a giant referendum on what that should be. Are
Yes.
we a Christian? Well, what kind of Christian? Okay, well, are we hippies? What kind of hippies? And
Yeah.
you hate the right people? Do you do you wear the right outfits? Um, and so how do you get around that? Because if you don't have any of that, if it's like, well, we're just, creatives trying to get together. And there's projects like that, like Cabin Dow or whatever, different sort of, let's get together. But you can't build anything really lasting because the fact of the matter is, one of the main things it comes down to is when you start raising kids, you're
Yeah.
like, I don't know. I want my kids
That
to
is
be around.
always my question with these groups, and it has been since I visited intentional communities like, 10 years ago. It was just like it was functional as long as everybody's kind of like in hedonistic mode and they're all just like childless. But once there's kids involved, you're like, I'm protecting my kids and my like family's interests above you. Sorry. And if what you're choosing
I,
to do is like against my family's interests, it's just not gonna go, you know?
yeah. And if it's not intergenerational, it doesn't mean it's not anything, but if it's not intergenerational, then its lasting impact is going to be pretty minimal.
Yep.
Yeah, how do you do that? How do you have some kind of a glue that can bring people together and a common understanding, um, and not get into these sort of parochial arguments?
Yep.
Uh, and that's tough. So in that, vein, I've thought about different, like everybody else, we're going to buy a big chunk of land. Everybody's going to move on it to different things. And maybe those are good ideas. But what I kind of landed on was the idea of having some kind of a base, a node, call it what you will, a place where people could meet and hang out. And you could have events and you could have, some people maybe living there for a while, some people just passing through, and start building out this vision without like I'm uprooting my whole family and we're living all next to each other and singing kumbaya every Thursday night, whatever.
And there are certain, is it also kind of driven by not necessarily the answers to questions, but there are certain kinds of questions you're asking at this place?
Yeah, that's a big one. I think is organizing more around questions than answers,
Yeah, that's good. That's helpful. Um,
where we're asking some of the same questions.
yeah, yeah, and then you have a certain kind of culture that it seems like in the Wagon Box. Maybe we can go transition and talking more about the Wagon Box now, but it seems like in the Wagon Box there's also like a asking a certain kind of question, but also I think having just like an interesting way of coming at questions. Like maybe this guy's thinking about it from like neuroscience and this guy's thinking about it from like, anthropology, pre civilizational anthropology, whatever. And then, there's all these different ways of coming at it that are like really diverse and really interesting. And also, I guess there's a level of tolerance there too.
Yeah, yeah, that porousness of how do you gatekeeping, because again it can't just um I think what we're experimenting with, so I guess just might as well introduce the Wagon
Yeah,
Box.
go
uh,
ahead.
yeah, so in sort of sorting through all of this, um I've had all kinds of different schemes and projects. Where I'm at right now is this compound, if you will, in Montana. We had a little school. We have a little schoolhouse and a good deal of housing. We have events and open mics and classes and stuff like that. But I needed somewhere bigger to kind of bring things up a little bit. So the Wagon Box is 20 acres with a restaurant, fully functional restaurant. It's got cabins, it's got a lodge, it's got RV spots, campground, wall tents, teepees, old camperized buses, and most importantly, it's a work in progress. It's when you're in these liminal spaces on the frontier, you got to be, it's evolving, and you got to be flexible and kind of have a vision of how things could be. And even that, the vision evolves also to do with the people that get involved.
Mm.
And so we've had many events there. And you're going to be there shortly for an event we'll talk about in a minute. But as far as that gatekeeping, a lot of it is just organic. We
Mm.
don't have. I tell people, I mean, it's a Christian organization insofar as I'm a Christian, and most of my friends are Christian, and America, has a Christian founding. But there's plenty of non-Christians that come to events. There's no doctrinal litmus test or anything. It's largely a conservative crew there, but I've had people that are very close that kind of consider themselves, leftists.
Yep.
So there's no real. It's very. It's something that's not really scalable, and I think that's what happened. I think to a lot of these organizations is the sort of the corporate takeover, not just of everything practically, like corporations took over a lot, which they did, but also the mindset of scalability, of
Mm.
you know um, branding, and what are
Yep.
has to be bullet pointed. You use the term spreadsheet brain. It's all part of the same thing. And so I think you saw more and more of that through the 70s and 80s, and by the 90s, everything had to be like, well, what are you? Are you, what is this thing?
Yep.
And what we're seeing now is people are tired of that. And despite what's, there's still a lot of carryover from that. I think a lot of people feel comfortable with a loosened identity politically, um, and a looser identity ecclesiastically. And I don't want to say looser as in they're wishy washy, but there's just a lot more comfortable. Even in some ways, even it's stronger. Like, this is where I am, but it doesn't have to be where everybody else is. This is where I stand with my church or my family, whatever. But I can associate with people on a much wider spectrum. So the Wagon Box is trying to carve out some space in that direction. Um, and the tricky thing there is, again, so what is it? So we have a restaurant, and people from the public go there and eat. They're used to it being a restaurant. We built into the restaurant a fairly substantial library. And already that was a little bit, to the locals, like, what's really going on here? And then with all the lodging, we have events, and it's got a bar there. And honestly, what we're coming to, so it started out, the events we did, like, kind of more like writers retreats and sort of intellectual retreats, guys just getting together. I think what's going on is, in this sort of cycle of bundling and unbundling and rebundling and that sort of thing, um, COVID was the great unbundling.
Mm.
Already a lot of that the internet had already begun that, but colleges were, everybody was from home and whatever, and restaurants and everything. And I think a lot of people were finally severed from things that were already on the way out, like restaurants, for instance. I mean, restaurants, I'm learning a lot about them because I'm running one now. And, in the 60s and 70s, I talked to these old timers, and they're like, oh, yeah, this place or that place used to be booming and whatever.
Yeah.
And what I'm realizing is, like, why were they booming? One of the reasons was because restaurants were a major facet of social interaction. So if you want to run into your friends, you go out to eat and you run into your friends there.
Mhm.
And that's no longer the case. I think people think of going to a restaurant, not everywhere, obviously, but a lot of people are like, it's all food oriented. Like, do I want the food? Do I want to pay for the food? Is this a better deal than the food I could make at home? How much time? Again, it's this sort of spreadsheet brain. I hear people all the time, well, I'd come to the Wagon Box more, but I did the math and it's cheaper to eat at home or whatever.
Right, yeah.
And, so people on that, all this sort of people sort of commodified their whole lives. Like, okay, go to the gym to work out. And a lot of their social engagement is online.
Yep.
And a lot of their intellectual, which obviously there's a mix between your social and intellectual engagement, and that's all online. And that was really cool because turns out you can reach a lot more interesting people online than you can, go into the local diner wherever you live and
Right.
actually live. But the downside is it's not enough. And I think in the wake of COVID, everybody was like, I need to be around other people. I need to be in a place. So I bought the Wagon Box with the goal of putting in a trust and making it a place where people can meet up and have conversations. I mean, to me, there's no greater earthly pleasure than being with close friends, having thoughtful conversation over good food.
Yep.
Uh, that's the good life, and so we wanted to have a place where people could do that. But I'm realizing as it evolves, it's very much like a college campus. It's very much like a campus. And I've been in education. My family's been in education for years, and I'm realizing that the sweet memories that I have of lunchroom conversations and stuff, and most people's memories of college, like the best memories, are not of sitting in a lecture, which is weird because that's the backbone, the classes and the degree and all that. When you're looking at going to college, like what degree am I going to get? What class am I going to take? And then 10 years later, none of that really matters. You don't
Right.
remember the years. Degree doesn't matter. The friendships you made, if you're in any kind of organizations, fraternities, the Young Republicans Club, some little anarchist crew that, occupied some corner, those are the meaningful things. And so I think I'm realizing, and we're kind of honing in on the Wagon Box as a campus where, sure, you have classes and you have some longer term projects, and I can get into some of the stuff that's going on longer term, some episodic stuff, but also people can just wander in and
Hmm.
see who's there and sit down for lunch or breakfast or dinner, or wander the property there along the streams, or rent a cabin for a week and meet other thoughtful people, have conversations, but also just read, take walks, do all the things that a campus sort of hosts. So that's
Hmm.
that's kind of the Wagon Box, and that's how it is an attempt to not to solve these things, but to sort of posture towards some kind of solution of these technological questions, of the meeting people and working on these things. That's that. Sorry,
Yeah,
talking.
no, no, that's good. I love that. Okay, so a couple of things you said. I love that you said it's not scalable. It seems like there's just a specific alchemy of this place and this time and these people who are drawn to it, which is super cool. And I love that that's just like the way that it's playing out. It's not like some model you're looking to replicate and exactly, although you could do something like this in other places. Um, what does it take to become a wagon box guy? I don't actually think I know the answer to this. Because I'm not one.
Oh,
It's for boy. It's for boys. It's
well, so
men only.
referring to what you're referring to is one aspect of the Wagon Box. So, I mean, you are obviously part of the Wagon Box project. You've been there before. You're going to be there in a couple of weeks. You're a big supporter of it, and you're going to be involved. So most colleges are run by a board of trustees, I think,
Yeah.
and it's this elite group of people. I remember, that the trustees would be coming, and you'd see like, they're making these fancy, desserts, and then they'd cut something off, and then all these rich people would show up, and then they'd make decisions, and that was it. Um, and I didn't really like that model. But anyway, the Wagon Box essentially right now is run by a fraternity of thoughtful guys, a mix of guys.
Hmm.
We've got, some of the guys are blue collar guys, thoughtful readers, but run plumbing companies, or they swing a hammer. We got PhDs and Oxford grads, and but it's a sort of organic network of guys that um, was involved with the ground floor and has a common vision of what this place could do and could be. And so that's the Fraternal Order of the Wagon.
I like
And
that. Yeah.
as it's organized right now, that's who runs the Wagon Box. I would say runs, who is the main sort of, whose voices have the most say in what's going on.
Yeah.
But that's not the only. Obviously there's a lot going on. And we're building some alliances with different. So in terms of a campus, um, how is it different than, say, the campus of any given college?
Yeah.
Well, there is, the way it's coming together is there is not one major, the trustees and the school, and that's it. And
Yep.
that's why, or the wagon isn't as much of a force completely, because what we want to do is sort of, in some ways I've described it as be hardware where different softwares can run.
Mm.
So some of our partners right now, Christian Halls International is founded by Nick Ellis. He's building out this sort of decentralized colleges that are kind of the Oxford model, that have tutors. We're the main physical hub for the Other Life. Justin Murphy's independent academic who has classes online. Paul Kingsnorth's been there, is planning having an event there. Speaking of that, we do kind of a lot of independent academics, which is something that kind of, again, had been going on for a while and really flourished during the COVID times.
Yeah.
But I was thinking the other day, Substack is kind of like a decentralized university. I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of these people you subscribe to, you're just getting lectures, and you're also
Yes.
a small community. They're like professors. And really, if you look back at the history of universities, in the medieval times, you basically just, particularly in Italy, you just find a professor and you make a deal with them. You like,
Hmm.
look, you know, have you as my tutor, and even before then, of course, the peripatetics. So it's going back to this old model of Substack is just, I like this guy, I like what he's saying, and really you're making yourself a student of them. And so the Wagon Box is kind of positioning itself to be a real life campus where different Substackers and different independent academics and different sort of decentralized academic programs can have events, have classes, can meet, and not just once. Like, anybody can rent a conference center anywhere.
Right.
Something very sterile about that,
Yep.
and something you can come back to time and time again, and it doesn't have that sort of whiff of corporatism. And as these organizations ally with the Wagon Box, they have skin in the game, and hopefully eventually we'll have a model where they actually participate in the structural organization of the.
Yep.
Of the
Okay, so a couple of different things. First of all, I've loved for a long time kind of this idea of, or at least from the beginning of Twitter, I was thinking about how a lot of people on Twitter, person who comes to mind is Stone Age Herbalist. He's like a an anthropologist who's ousted from doing like anything like real anthropology in modern anthropology departments because they've now been hijacked into reinterpreting the data along modern brainworm lines. And he's like, no, if we're actually trying to look at like, the whole history of evidence and everything we have thus far, like this is the right way to interpret this. But he's like really not allowed to do that in his day job, and so he's like separately online having this account and writing a Substack. And so it's like you get like the most up to date anthropology, the most interesting anthropology coming out that's cutting edge that you cannot get in the academy from this guy's Substack. And so I
yeah,
love this kind of model where you've got these people where the universities are kind of like these dying institutions, or you're not really able to say or think the most interesting or cutting edge possible interpretations of the world and data and all of this stuff inside those walls. And so these people are sort of living these parallel lives, or maybe even defecting from academia and living this other life. And so they need some place, they're looking for audiences independently, but there's this W.H. Auden poem where he has this, dotted ironic points of light. So their little points are trying to connect with one another. So I love that Wagon Box as like a magnet pulling everybody in. And then the other thing I was thinking about, Donald Antonin told me about this model of the Royal Society, which is just like scholars who they didn't have any physical building, but they kind of hung together, similar kind of thought. They would write each other letters and share their letters with one another, write papers and have each other read them and comment and critique. And like we're already doing a version of this. We have like a group chat from the last event, and people are sharing their writing and critiquing it. And it's almost like we have so many interesting writers and thinkers. I cannot keep up with everybody's work. Like there's just so much going on, which is a great problem to have, that you have like such interesting friends. You can't keep up with all the stuff they write.
Yeah.
So those two things I just wanted to say, but then I was thinking it might be fun to just talk about our experience putting together the last event, because that might give people an idea of like what it's like and how these kind of like partnerships, friendships, relationships, loose network things come to be.
Sure.
Um, so I could just start from my side, which is I had an event at the Wagon Box last October. It was October, right? Yeah.
Was.
And the reason it happened is, first I met James Pogue on Twitter after he wrote his like big breakout Vanity Fair piece. Our friendship started because I was kind of making fun of him for making fun of homesteaders as right wing. I was like, "Oh, look at us with our chickens, we're so right wing." And then he DM'd me and he was like, "I don't actually think homesteaders are right wing. I just have to like, I have to like kind of bring in these alternative ideas to a mainstream audience, and like in like a, gentle massaging way." And he'll say this out loud too. It's not like I'm revealing any secrets. And so, we became friends, and then we kind of realized we're both of this sort of former lefty, of the same kind of genre of thinkers and all the same writers that we've read over the years, and then now kind of like homeless from, everyone kind of losing their minds and us pretty much staying similar to what we thought before. Anyway, so we were like, we should definitely have some kind of event. We searched all kinds of things, and we were like, the main thing is I don't want to have an event that's like in an air-conditioned hotel. I just don't want to do that. It's just a horrible, it's just
Terrible.
horribly against the whole ethos of the questions you're asking, which is like,
Right.
how do you escape the machine? Like, we'll start by like eating together and being outside at all, you know? And so it's just like sitting in the air conditioning, you're freezing cold, you're dressed up, the food is horrible. So we were like, we can't do that. And so we're like, James is, typical writer type, hard to get a hold of. So that never happened until we like tried and tried to make it happen. Then until James introduced me to Paul and Seneca Scott also, and Seneca's friend Andrew. And then we had a little team of people who were like basically putting together this event. And I was like, oh, the Wagon Box is like, so it's it's such a perfect venue, but I didn't even know much about what your whole thing was. Just it's such a great venue. It's in Wyoming. It's great. There's cabins. It'll be such a nice place, like really fitting with the ethos. But James had already known that you had this whole, sort of network growing, and he was like, this would be a good match. So okay, I'll bring us up to there, then you can tell me from your side.
Yeah. It was a good, I mean, there's been many of those, just things coming together. And you do, I mean, any of these things is easy to lose heart because you're inventing it as you go, right? But when you realize that there's so much other people kind of having similar ideas and things coming together, you get the sense that you're on the right track. And
Mhm.
every time I mention everything I'm thinking about or doing, I run into so many people who are like, "Oh yeah, that's what we're working on. That's what I'm thinking about."
Yeah.
So yeah, so I met James. It's kind of interesting. James and I met during COVID at these kind of anyway, rage against the state, like tent revival, anti-lockdown protests.
Okay.
Um, but anyway, he came out of the Wagon Box and I had just acquired it, and he mentioned like, oh yeah, I get this friend Ashley, and we've been thinking about this project, and so yeah, so I guess we had a meeting and we started, you know, it was there wasn't a really clear agenda. Um,
The whole time we were like, what is this event about? And me and James, like, we really resisted. And the same thing is true with Jason and Doomer Optimism, like, really resist, like you said at the beginning, drawing too clear of lines or making things too legible. Because then as soon as you do, people are like, oh, look at this stupid thing, or this person thinks that they're like the expert on this topic or whatever. So you don't want to do that. Wait, before we go further, I want to tell you, James was texting me when he first came to the Wagon Box. I think he got snowed in.
yeah, he lived
Okay,
there
so
for like
he's like, I'm stuck in this place in
12.
Wyoming. It's a very cool place, but I need to get out of here. But I got to tell you about it. It's crazy. It's so weird. And so, anyways, that was funny that that was his first visit. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Well, that was the second visit. He
Okay, that was
came.
a second.
I mean, when he first came, it was hardly a thing, but he came and stayed for about a month, and it was the most brutal winter that many people could remember.
Okay. And he kept
But
sending me pictures of his dog, Banjo, in the snow. That was cute.
yeah,
And then I was like,
Banjo,
oh, yeah, this place seems really
the
cool. So
only
we,
dog I'm allowed in the restaurant.
yes.
But
So then we just,
so
put
yeah,
together some meetings and then you
yeah,
can
we
continue.
started thinking about different people. And again, I think that's the thing is it's relationship driven, and it's who are people that we connect with, resonate with, and there was a good deal. I mean, not it was not all one type of person there for sure.
Hmm.
The
Hmm.
homesteaders and some normies as far as their job or their what they do. But anyway, but yeah, and then fortunately, I'm connected with the Front Porch Republic folks, which is also another adjacent group who will be eventually holding some events at the Wagon Box. But yeah, Paul Kingsnorth is going to be there, and I reached out to him, and he came out. But just an interesting mix of characters: John Asconis and Micah Metacroft and
Yes.
Santi, and a handful of wagon guys. My own the tighter network of the wagon lads.
Yes.
Anyways, we had fascinating discussions. There was debates, there was lectures, there was music, there was singing, there was jumping in the creek every morning, and it was beautiful. And honestly, I mean, if eventually Box could do patchwork of events somewhat like that, I think it just would be the coolest place in the world.
So, okay, I'll say from my perspective,
Yeah.
also what was so cool. So first of all, you got Paul Kingsnorth to come, which was an amazing get and so perfect because Kingsnorth, I think, has the kind of writing that encapsulates a lot of the questions we all of us are asking. So it was a great magnet. It was a great like person to hold up. Like if you know Paul Kingsnorth, this is the kinds of stuff we want to talk about. And so, this is a good person to have as like, the flagship person at the event. And so what was amazing, what was crazy and amazing is that we came from Porch Republic. We all went to the Madison event.
A
And
bunch
then
of it.
so a bunch of us and Paul Kingsnorth and Paul McNiel and me and my daughter, Lucia, and like Andy and Katura, Andy Hickman
Word, Gil,
and
and
Gord, and we all went to the
Convoy.
Front Porch Republic event, and then we did a caravan over to the Wagon Box with Paul Kingsnorth and his family, who, by the way, didn't really know how they were getting to Wyoming until they got to Madison, and they didn't really know who we were or what they were doing, which was also kind of amazing that it wasn't like so, maybe it could have been a little better planned, but it wasn't so overly like controlled and planned. Like you're going to be giving a keynote address, it's going to be on this topic, and it's going to be like in a boring, air conditioned room. It was Paul Kingsnorth was like, let's check it out. I don't know who these people are, but they seem cool and they're vetted through Front Porch Republic. So like, let's go. And then I realized like, first of all, we're on this trip together. He's with all strangers and his family, Kingsnorth is, which was so fun and so nice. But I'm like, thinking I should probably like try to tell him who he's with. So the first night I like printed out, or I think I emailed him a list of like a link from everybody's writing, like just so you know who you're here with. Like this is some of the stuff people have written, whatever. But the drive over was so fun because it was like a real American road trip style, Corn Palace and Wall Drug, and that was really fun too, which also was just like very wagon ethos.
It was a fun experience. And this fall, so we might as well do the pitch here because it
Yeah.
is open to listeners. And again, like, it's just sort of the semi-porous gatekeeping, and kind of as you alluded, one of the major gatekeeping things for the Wagon Box is just it kind of selects for the type of people who would
Who
go
will
out
come?
go out to something. It's always a little bit vague, and it's always a little bit of a risk. And even the very first event we did, which was just a little writers retreat, me and a few friends invited some people, and that core group, I don't know, there's something, I mean, I guess it kind of like the American founding, right? It's all people who are willing to get in a boat and just kind of
Yeah.
long known. So Labor Day weekend, we're having, right? I mean, this is your baby. I'm just helping host it, but it has been called the machine against human nature. And the machine, if you're not familiar with the term, a few people have used it over the years. Paul Kingsnorth fairly liberally. It's it's not particularly technology. It's not particularly the mainstream. It's just that whatever that thing is that seems to be running.
Anti-human, I guess, or anti like flourishing, the thing that is trying to either like control us or keep us down or limit our like range of human experiences, like, whether it's technology or the state or the corporate world or whatever, not
There's something big.
necessarily big.
Okay. Uh,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, whatever that fakeness from and the top downness is the machine,
Yeah.
and the event is the machine against human nature, which is sort of ground up the organic, the community, the family, the whatever,
Connection with land,
the
connection with
land.
community, being involved in like organic life. And by that is like your own body as an organic entity, your relationship, your like childbirth, but also community, also the land, like getting your hands dirty, anything that's like part of organic life biology, that feels more alive and real,
Yeah,
including like talking to people face to face is against the machine. So we're doing this over Labor Day weekend. We have a really interesting group of people who are coming. And we pretty much have the schedule sorted out, but it's kind of a co-created event. So the last event, a lot of people kind of at the last minute felt moved to speak. And so we kind of moved things around and got them space to speak. And what was, I mean, some of my favorite moments, first of all, people are jumping in the little stream that runs through the property that's cold for their little cold plunge in the morning, getting in the sauna. People are trout fishing. There's kids running around. The food is amazing. There's always like some weird meat that everyone's eating, which I like a lot. And sometimes it's hunted by Paul. Um, and we had singing, we had an open mic night, we had mini debate night, which I think we should recreate. I think that was
flash.
so fun. That
Oh, and
was
a lot of good conversations. I
and
mean, that
tons
took
of great
back.
off conversations, like people sitting in the restaurant together, people sitting in the library, just like, processing what they're hearing. And, similar to a campus where like you get the lecture and then you are off in the dining hall and you're sitting and you're kind of processing it with your friends and debating things. And then it moves into a dinner party and you're debating. And those are some of my favorite memories from college for sure. To give a little sense of the vibe, I just want to say I want to read the 2 paragraphs Kingsnorth wrote about the event after attending. And of course, try to think about this through the lens. Paul Kingsnorth, he's hasn't been in the United States, I think he said since 2001 or something, until this event where he
Yeah.
just came from Madison with us across the country and then to the Wagon Box. And then he went home. Well, he didn't go directly home, but Then he was soon after that went home. So this is his first like experience of America post that, for 20 years. So after my time in Madison with the good people of the Front Porch Republic, I headed west with a different tribe. My family and I were picked up and driven through the plains and interstates and prairies and gas stations and other such Springsteeny landscapes of Wisconsin and South Dakota down to the mountains of Wyoming where the snow was coming down hard. There we gathered in the Wagon Box Inn, whose walls are bedecked with portraits of Tolstoy, Dostoevsky, Simone Weil, and where an epic floor-to-ceiling library replaces big screen TV and jukeboxes for an invite-only conference on what it means to remain human in the machine age, which this is like so perfect. He's such a good writer. If the porchers were mostly cooked, the Wyoming crew between I can't even read this, I'm so embarrassed. The Wyoming crew between them offered a wide range of flavors and culinary styles from well done to properly raw. Homesteaders, rebel truckers, hobo poets, train jumpers, urban organizers, Washington intellectuals, former policymakers, military officers, anarchists, ecologists, and recovering journalists, Christian farmers, all of them us, in search of the key to remaining human. Everyone there could see what was coming as the machine bore down. The only real question was what form it would take and how to respond. These are the questions I've been writing about and my readers have been debating here at the Abbey for the past 2 years. So again, yeah, it was perfect to have Kingsnorth. He totally got the vibe. There was actually one moment, I don't know if you were in the room for this, but where all the like, there were some like conservative, but also interested in environmental issue policymakers there, like Micah Metcalf and Santi Ruiz and John Askinis, and they're all talking about, environmental issues. And then Kingsnorth raises his hand and he's like, I'm so glad the conservatives have come around to like 1970s environmentalism. Were
Yeah,
you
there's.
there for that?
I think I was.
I
Yeah,
thought
there's
that was perfect.
shuffling the deck, and we just want to be a place where that can, where the cards can settle, um, in a good way. But yeah, I think despite all the sort of tribalism you see, there's a lot of things from the environment to industrial policy to, I mean, it's like really right wing thing now to like drink raw milk. Like,
Which is
really?
like an organic, yeah.
Like 15 years ago,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
And the fact is, like the right wing, left wing, a lot of that stuff, nobody just, a lot of people don't care anymore.
Yeah.
Uh, and the Wagon Box is creating a space where we can focus more on the important questions in an environment that still has a particular culture. It's not, for everybody, but if it's for you and you're listening, consider attending. Um, it it's The space is limited, but as far as camping space, it's fairly unlimited, and we have teepees up that don't have. We have some really like glampy teepees with queen size beds and all the bells and whistles. But we also just have a lot of teepees that are just a teepee. So if you want to put a cot in there and throw your sleeping bag in the side of that, there's also other lodging nearby. So if you're interested in attending this event, go to thewagonbox.com, attend. You'll see the event, or you can reach out anyway, and we can try to we can make it work. I know
Yeah.
it's tough, have a perfect drop down and everything. There are some. I think we still have some wall tent stuff. The wall tents are really nice. They're really
Yeah, the
comfortable.
wall tents are super nice. You're
Uh,
up on a platform and
I'm
so it's super well appointed.
careful. Some of them aren't on platform. Some on the grass. Nice. Um, but we can fit you in if you're interested in attending. And if you're interested in staying involved and watching or getting involved with the Wagon Box project, um, same thing. Go to the Wagon Box website, thewagonbox.com, attend. And the main focus is going to be, I mean, we're building out these particular educational projects, this sort of constellation of the Other Life and CHI, and the Gumption Academy, the Odysseus Academy, and all these different groups that will sort of be using the property. But also, we'll be doing residencies. We'll be doing like a scholar in residence and writer in residence, or somebody that wants to stay there for a week or a month, particular project. And we're going to be trying to link people up with donors who can help fund that. And if you're a donor and think, man, I've been donating, you know, a lot of money to my alma mater, and for what? They're playing beer pong, and they don't. They're much more worried about the current thing, the cause du jour, and or the flip side of that. That's a big problem in a lot of campuses. The flip side of something being so
Esoteric.
well, because they're trying so hard not to be woke, that there's so much gatekeeping ideologically that they can't explore different ideas and thoughts. That is really part of the educational process.
Yep.
So Wagon Box, it's a conservative, very family friendly place, but you can, have a beer on the deck. You can, stay up till 2 in the morning and smoke a cig outside and shiver and figure out the world's problems. Um, it's a great experience, and it's
Yeah.
something a little bit. I hate to say it, but somebody just kind of got to be there. So if you want to be
Yeah.
involved,
Check it
reach out,
out.
get
Yep.
involved. If you're like, man, this is awful vague. Hey, that's the frontier. The frontier's like that. We're on the frontier of a new way of getting together, of learning, of meeting, where a lot of things that have been broken apart, education and family and blue collar, white collar, technology, Luddites, all these different things have been compartmentalized. A lot of them are coming back together, and the Wagon Box is one of those places where a lot of these different sort of fields can interface. And so, yeah, it's going to be a little bit blurrier, but it's beautiful, and you should come see it.
Yeah, and I'll just note that we decided not to do like an open invite, like just plastering this link on, Twitter, Substack, whatever, where basically, Paul and I had a discussion. Like I think Doomer Optimism listeners passed the sniff test of being invited, but it's not really an open invite thing. It's more we're trying to intentionally curate an audience. It's not necessarily for everyone. And I think it'll be intentionally curated also by who has the gumption to get out to Wyoming,
Right.
which like you said, it's a self-selecting group, but then that group ends up being super interesting and intrepid and courageous and fun and like, jovial. Like how many
All the
of the guys ended up jumping in the stream? So many of them. So fun,
yeah,
right?
it's so good.
Yeah.
I
So just like it's kind of like this virtuous cycle, self-selecting thing, which makes it a little bit vague, but if you go there and experience it, it's not vague at all. It's very, very concrete what it is. I think by the end of our first event, people got a good sense of what it was. And they were kind of trying to work it out as they were experiencing it, but it was almost like the experience provided at least half of the explanation as the talks did.
sure.
You can't just explain it all, which I think is perfectly in line with your discussion about not scaling things and things being sort of individual and belonging to a place. Anything else you want to add about the Wagon Box, the last event, the upcoming event, the idea of turning the Wagon Box, or not turning it, but conceptualizing the Wagon Box as a campus that we didn't touch on?
Um, not really. I mean, we will be having some winter events. We heretofore a lot of the events have been philosophy, writing. But if you have something that you want to host, we're open to hosting a wide variety of things. Um, and yeah, it's 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 an adventure, and I think where the whole sort of legacy versus the parallel movement or the decentralized, um, you're seeing people realize that there's a lot of risk in leaving the mainstream, in not going to college, in not just getting a job at the New York Times, in not just following the existing tracks. But I think more and more people are coming to terms that there's a lot of risk in staying too, and
Yep.
in being part of something whose values are alien to them, or it's so big and controlled by invisible forces that they don't
Yeah.
understand. They don't know what the values are. And so they
Right.
want to be part of something that they can at least feel like they understand who's involved and what it's about, even if they
Yep.
don't have a greater pitch or a perfect mission statement.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. And yeah, I think one thing you and I have talked about before is, to me, a lot of navigating these alternative worlds is about finding individual relationships that really resonate with you, individual people who seem really cool and who, you try things out with and you see how it goes. Every wagon lad I've met in the wild has been wonderful. And so it speaks to one thing I'll get on the record is that Paul and I both have talked about having this like Gertrude Stein mentality where like we're hosting we're not at least for
Just all
me,
about
like
all.
it's all about making the vibes, attracting the interesting people to hang out with each other, and sort of like being open and being on the cutting edge of being open enough to cutting edge or different, frontier ideas that you're, not going to preclude or, cut anything out. I'll just say briefly, you can go on the website and look at the schedule, but some of the themes we're talking about this year, over the Labor Day weekend, we've got Christianity, farming, and ecology is one talk. Navigating traditional womanhood is another. We've got um, Paul will be talking a little bit about the network state and the ideas of how the Wagon Box could fit into that idea. Seneca Scott probably going to talk about urban agriculture and crime. He does work in Oakland, criminal justice reform. Falling in love at the end of the world is a talk. Failure of liberalism and globalization. I think we got Pogue talking about these things. We got to talk about preppers, trout fishing lessons with James Pogue if he's up for it. A conversation about the future of art, which I think is great. And then Andy and Katura Hickman are going to be talking about their project for the Free Press, Falling Back in Love with America, where they're visiting all these different towns and figuring out, is America worth settling in? I decided yes after being abroad. So,
That's something
um,
all or many of you I have struggled with. Yeah.
yeah, for sure. So, just to look at the diversity of topics we're going to be covering, but all kind of touching on this machine versus the human and nature both, is super interesting, and at least in my opinion. So,
Other
um,
early September. The Wagon Box food. I mean, we're gonna have. Last time we had elk and bison and moose. We'll definitely have some bison. Maybe some elk, and then whatever trout anybody catches, we'll fry that up too. The Wagon Box cooks without seed oils,
well,
and
if we could get RFK there, he would bring the bear, but he's not, he's not coming this time. Okay,
knows.
so.
Actually, you never know when RFK is going to show up with a
No, I
bear.
know. You never know
I
who's
wasn't
going to show
planning to go
up.
to Central Park either. So
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Paul. This was great.
thanks, Dad.
Yeah,
Thanks for everything
well,
you're doing. Connecting great people and the Doomer project of which you're a part, Doomer Optimist project. I think it's a cool thing, and I think it's brought some really neat folks together. And at the end of the day, that's the main thing is people and people working together and building something beautiful, the kingdom of heaven.
I love that. Thanks.